everyone, welcome to the ComicBase Livestream. I'm your host, Pete Bickford, and I'll be here for the next hour or so talking comics, ComicBase, and a lot of tech tips this time out. But one thing I definitely want to do is please put your own comments into the stream. If you put them at ComicBase TV, I'll hit as many of them as I can because I want to hit, you guys are here for this whole thing. So I'd like to get your questions first if I could. Other than that, we will hit questions from the mailbag, which we have enough of to do a pretty sizable show. Before we get going, though, I want to say hi to everyone. Andre's first in the gate here. Welcome. Mike Beam coming in from Vancouver, Washington, where apparently the weather's turned a little south. We got our mod in the house, Greg Rehecht from South Jersey, and Wukaki out in Boulder, Colorado. I don't know how to say your name, man, but anyway, welcome to the show. So a couple things. Tyler T as well. Welcome. One thing I want to say before we get going, a couple of ComicBase quick notes. So, first of all, build 916 is the current one right now. Which the main thing that's different about it is it has better formatting if you're using it on a laptop. You might be a little bit happier with the toolbar and such, especially if you've switched between different sized laptop screens in the last year or so, and it's maintained your old preferences. Other than that, though, not a lot different in the program itself. A lot of stuff going on the back end, though. In ComicBase news, we are almost done moving our server backends around. Been talking about for the last month or so. We laid in a ginormous amount of disk storage arrays and reorganizing web servers and database servers and where everything's stored and so forth. And we're just about done with that whole rigmarole. The good news about this whole thing, when it's all said and done, is it should be much more scalable, which is geek speak for saying that we can throw more hardware at it much more easily in the future. That will help us, as we kind of grow things out. Should help performance, particularly if we're doing battle with Amsterdam botnets or all sorts of nonsense like that. I mean, there's so much garbage in the computer world. If you saw our firewall logs, you would not believe how much nonsense we deal with on a daily basis. But anyway, we are. This should be something that should just help everything out. Just all things all around. That said. We are putting the finishing touches on some of the server move stuff. If things are a little bit weird, if your reports aren't posting right away, if you post new sales on the database and it takes a little longer for them to go, give it a little bit of time, and for the next day or two, for us to, because it's possible we're working on a particular component. But let me move my camera around. I want to be more beautifully framed in the picture. Yes, sorry, there we are. But that being said, if the problem continues, please send us a note at support@comicbase.com and let us know that something is not quite right. Because, like I say, you would not believe. I mean, just so many terabytes of information have been moved to different places in the last couple of weeks that we want to make sure we get everything nailed down right. And then I'm always reminded whenever we do these infrastructure type things what a really big undertaking this whole ComicBase thing is on the back end. So anyway, let's see here. Let's see. Sorry, that's a question on Slack, but if you want me to answer to it, join us in the chat and we'll get to you on that one. All right, so with all that said, other big news on the back end over here is 2 gigabit internet is apparently coming to our neighborhood. I have a practice ever since we got our gigabit connection. I think it's been about a year or so ago. Ever since that happened, we have been calling our service provider every 6 months or so, just to say, hey, if you ever get a faster internet connection, because we can never have enough speed, please let us know. And they had been talking for a while about bringing 2 gigabit to some sections of their network, and apparently I caught them in just the right time where they said, oh yeah, now let me double check the service map, and oh yeah, it looks like your area just came live. So starting apparently the day after Thanksgiving, we will be rocking a 2 gigabit upload speed. Our upload speed is your download speed, which means that stuff should be even faster. So that is a very cool thing. Wish us luck on that one. I don't think it's going to be particularly involved in terms of like they don't need to dig up our premises anymore or run new wire. I don't believe, but we are going to probably have to lay out another 4 digits to upgrade our firewall. So it should be something that's kind of transparent to you guys. It just you should sign in one day and everything should just be even faster, and that should be a glorious thing. Anyway, so that is happening. Wish us luck, and that's coming soon. All right. With that said. And hello to some other folks out there, from Brian Price out in Texas, as well as Ed from up in Canada someplace, I believe. I can't recall the exact city, but anyway, welcome. And apparently we have some musical cues going on in the chat. I'll just leave those alone. Okay, in comic news this week, probably the big story is the Marvels. It's doing exactly what everyone thought or feared, depending on where you were in the production on this one. From what I hear, it's a bit of a confusing mess of a movie, but more importantly, no one's seeing the darn thing. Its initial, when they first started thinking about it, they were thinking, hey, maybe it'll be $100 million opening weekend, and they were very quickly like, well, maybe 70 to 80, and it turns out it clocked in at 46 million domestically on the whole thing. They need to make about $450 million to break even. But one thing that's helping them quite a bit along that route isn't so much the people going out and watching the movie, but apparently I read today that they had apparently locked in a $55 million subsidy from the lovely people of England. So anyway, people of England, thank you very much for for supporting our movie industry. We couldn't do it without you. So that's a thing. Marvel, meanwhile, coming after a lot of just really underperforming movies, have moved many of their releases way out. It did not help at all. The writer's strike, the actor's strike, super didn't help. But frankly, the underperformance of their current slate of Phase 4 movies is really probably behind a lot of this as much as anything. But they have moved. Deadpool 3 is the only movie that they were even talking about doing that's still coming out next year. That's coming in July. Kraven the Hunter is going to be at the end of next summer. So right as things turn in there, but everything else is slipped into 2025. Blade, which was really the first really cool Marvel movie, we talked about this a lot on the ComicBase After Dark show, if you guys hit that one, is now slipped to the end, not even the beginning, the end of 2025, and that one is probably, well, honestly, given what I've heard about the script development on that one, it's probably the for the best. Wesley Snipes is certainly gone from the project. He will be much missed, but more importantly, they just didn't seem like they knew what they were doing in terms of the script. One of the scripts that they apparently were working with at one point had him as basically the fourth lead character in a movie filled with all sorts of powerful women and life lessons. So exactly what I'm looking for in a butt-kicking vampire movie. So who knows? Other comic industry news that is interesting, and then we'll get into the tips on the whole thing. Alpha Core, which is the latest release from the folks over at the Rippaverse. Let me see if I can, I'm gonna not, I'll see if I can queue this up. Come on, let's pull up a web browser. We can do this. Yes, I know how to use computers. I'm good at this. The Rippaverse, let's find it over there, is Eric July's comic company, and he has had just remarkable success. I mean, it's weird because on one hand, I'm absolutely blown away by the amount of money he has raised for his projects. The projects themselves, ISOM issues number 1 and 2, I thought they were okay. I mean, they were 96-page graphic novels. They clocked in basically at $35-40 each, which is a hell of a lot of money to pay for certainly an unknown graphic novel. I mean, it'd be a hell of a lot to pay for The Killing Joke. And the story was fine. But I definitely have my concerns as to whether or not that's a sustainable model for comics going forward. That being said, I think a lot of people threw money at it because they like the idea of independent creators striking out, doing their own thing, saying to hell with people who say we can't do this. And I think to support him both because he has a very much a solid podcast base, but also out of really just wanting to support independent creators in a market that was really quite hostile to him for whatever reasons, good and or bad. But it was really a big, heck with you, we got this, we're going to do it ourselves. And his first couple campaigns rolled in like $1 million plus per issue, which is absolutely stunning amounts of money for a comic book project. Alpha Core, as it stands right now, and this one is written by Chuck Dixon. Forget who the artist is on this one. They look decent, but it's slipping my mind at the moment. Is the latest entry in the ISOM universe. It's a new team, but the work on it is another 96-page graphic novel, and it's underperforming slightly, which means it's only got just about $1 million in backing for, again, the first issue. And of course, it hasn't shipped yet. So, yes, what are we at? $961,000. Let me just scroll down here. $961,670 and counting is total sale right now. I honestly, I don't know what to say about this other than, hats off to Eric July, Chuck Dixon Company for just amazing freelance. Just you got to respect the independent spirit of this whole thing. There's no two ways about that one. I hope the book is good. It probably will be okay. It's Chuck Dixon, for God's sake. Chuck is one of the more consistent guys working in the field. I gotta say, maybe I'm getting old, but there are certain things I'm hitting in life where, like, I was out just at a restaurant the other day, and there was just the hamburger on the bar menu was $20, and I sit there and go like, dude, I can't do it. It's just and I'm sitting there looking at a $40 graphic novel, and I'm just like, I don't know, man. I got to have a really big excuse to want to go that big for just a straight up graphic novel. But maybe I'm just being old fashioned. Maybe just everything costs that much these days, and I'm just being cheap. I don't know. But that one's psychologically, that's a hard price point for me. But apparently, for $1 million worth of business, apparently people are pulling the trigger on that one. So good on them. We'll see, and we'll take it from there. If you guys caught our latest ComicBase After Dark show, there was a lot of pretty pointed discussion about the state of the comics industry, particularly new comic sales. For the short version being, as far as anyone can tell, new comic sales are terrible. It's hard to put numbers on terrible, but compared to, if we're talking about mainline, the same comic books that we were talking about in 1965, the same comic books we all grew up reading in the 1980s, as opposed to pants and stuff like that, and manga. If we're talking about just issue to issue of your standard floppy comic book, it's a nasty market out there right now. It's nothing like it was. That being said, congratulations to the wider market. We have broadened out to the point where, like, if we're just simply talking about telling stories with pictures and words interposed, there's a lot of that happening, and manga certainly eating the place up, as is very, I don't know what you would call it, juvenile comics. The everything from the My Dear Dumb Diaries to the Dogmans. Again, there's a strong sales argument to be made that Dave Pilkey is the #1 comic artist in the world right now. Could be, but not sure if that's what we are all thinking if we're thinking about comics. So take for that what you will. But anyway, with that said, please join us next time we do get together for the ComicBase After Dark streams. That is unlike this one in that we really do get very unfiltered as far as what we're thinking about stuff, and it's a nice kind of very frank discussion. We hold them about once a month, so please, when you see the invite for the next one go out, feel free to take a look at it, and if you're interested, you also can be part of the show. So we do it as a big StreamYard chat, and we have as many people in it as we can afford, and it's generally a good time, and have a couple of drinks and kick back and talk openly about comics and whatever else is on people's minds. So that's the commercial for that one. All right, last thing I want to say before I get to the tips on everything, and that is, honestly, I want to throw this out as a community poll, and if I knew how to do this within StreamYard, I would put up as a poll, but I'll admit I've seen it done, but I don't know how to do it myself. But just, if you guys would, in the chat, give me a quick heads up as to what your gut impression is as to when in reality does Black Friday start these days. It's one of the traditional times that we will have sales of some sort or another. I'm asking for a friend, but I'm also asking just in general, because I mean I'm getting about Black Friday the way that other people get about having Christmas stuff on the steel floor before Halloween's over. I'm sitting there going like, wait a minute, what are we doing Black Friday for in the middle of I mean I saw people saying, oh, here's super early Black Friday previews in right around Halloween time, but that being said, I'm getting a lot of stuff in my mail and advertisements right now from people who's like, oh yeah, we're going to be starting our Black Friday sale in about 2 minutes and it's going to run through whatever. Are you guys feeling, is that the new zeitgeist, or is it more like, no, Black Friday happens after the turkey is digested and not a second before midnight 01 on Black Friday? Just give me your heads up on this one. How much is too much of this stuff, and how much is just all good fun and lay stuff on as much as you want? This may influence thinking around the ComicBase offices, but it's definitely been a conversation we've had around here, and let us know what you think. So anyway, thank you for that, and we'll get into it. Brian says, started about a week ago. Yeah, so it definitely feels like it. Mike Beam says, it starts when Madison Avenue as it starts and no longer defined by the day. Yeah, I totally get that. I guess I'm wondering, it's like, in your heart of hearts, when is the first time you actively care that anyone's running a sale, and how much is it just the noise of the modern world? I mean, because no one, I don't think it's in anyone's interest to just be part of the noise. But if someone were to say, hey, yeah, we're having a Black Friday sale and you should care, when should that start for you? And again, that applies to us and it applies to, frankly, everyone else. I don't care if it's the local hardware store. When are they going in where it's just too damn early, and stop it already? All right, let me know. All right, and with that said, let's go over to the other computer here and let's start running tips. So, flipping over there, like get the controller of that mouse and flipping to the other screen. There we are. Cool. All right, so this is the mighty ComicBase demo computer, which is actually playing along this week. So far the video switched when it was supposed to, and so far things are good. So let's hope the streak continues. All right, so. And there's some other comments here. Greg repeated I think there about it's like Christmas show up at Lowe's before Halloween. Doug's opinion is it's when the Iowa plays Nebraska. Well, there you go. And I love how both Iowa's and Nebraska's football teams are consistent enough that you can count on them all being contenders at that point in the season every damn year. It's just so true. Okay, so first question that people had is, what do the update stats mean? Which is like, that's a tech tip, but no, apparently we've gotten enough mail on this one that this one was actually a request passed in by our own tech support team, saying, yeah, we're getting a lot of calls, could you comment on this stuff, because it'd be a good one for the show. So this one's from Mark. So anyway, so let's go to it. And of course, I have a terrific one here because I ran the same update twice in a row, so it's not going to show half of the stats that I wish it would show. So that's a bummer. Let me first of all pull on the magnifier here so I can zoom in here, and we'll take it from there. So, as you guys know, when you are in ComicBase and you say Internet, check for updates, which is right there. Now this time it's going to say, here's a bonus tip here. If you've already done the update and want to do it again for some reason, if you hold down the Shift key and you say check for sales, check for sales and purchases. If you say hold down the Shift key and say check for updates, it will then say, well, do you want to re-download the last update? Which, if something happened in the middle of you updating, or you just for whatever reason you wanted to change something and check it again or whatever else, that is a thing that you might want to do. In which case, go ahead and hold down the Shift key, say yes to this, and it will run through the update process again. I'm going to skip to the end of that though, because at the end of the update process, you're going to see something like I just did right here, which says, all right, your data's been updated. It's got the latest content price updates, and depending on what you did with your data during that time, you'll see different stuff appear here. Now, this is the phony baloney database that appears on that I use for the live stream here. It's basically a copy of my own database from many years ago, and then randomly mutated by whatever we had to do to feed the feed the demos here. So don't take this as gospel writ, but this will give you some kind of idea of what we're dealing with. Now, in this whole thing, you'll typically see here's the big number of what your collection, your overall collection's worth. Now, what that is specifically is that's every collectible you've got. It's the books, the magazines, newspapers, whatever collectibles you're tracking in the database, times their current market value, times the quantity you've got, and then diminished by whatever condition. So if it's not near mint, then if it's very fine, it's that's worth 66% of the near mint price, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the collection's value. All right, so we immediately are going to get into a discussion of value versus price, but I'm going to park that one just for the second, because typically over here after an update, you'll also see something I didn't see here because I ran it twice. If you typically what you'll see next to this thing is like around your books, your comic books, is you'll see a little green or red plus and minuses. So the green ones are going to be pluses, and the minus ones will be the red ones will be minus, and that's it'll say it plus or minus on the items. So that's how many items were added or removed from each of those categories during the time between your last update and now. You'll see, again, little indicators, plus minus, however many items that was. And you'll see the value, similarly, will be plus or minus in green or red to indicate, to go along with whether it's plus or minus, to say which of these collectibles went up or down during that time as well. Now, so that is between the last time you updated and now, which is why I'm not seeing a darn thing on that right now, because right before the show I forced the update a second time, and so it compared itself to my last baseline, and my last baseline was exactly the same as this one, so it's not showing plus or minus anything, and so that's why this is the way it is. Now, if I were to go and add a couple books or changes some prices and then update again, then you'd see those things would reappear there. But that's what that stuff is all about. This is really just saying between the last time you updated and now, how did those parts of your collection change? Lastly, you might see a little blue line down here which says View Unrecognized Items. If you happen to see this down here, I'm going to say it's worth looking at. Now, this one, again, this is kind of like my phony baloney database, and so it's more out of sync than my real database. But typically what will happen is we will very much resist renaming items in the database once they've been published. That being said, especially if they haven't really come out in the real world yet, we will often rename them, because we will often find out that people will solicit an item as one thing, and then when we finally get a look at the whole thing in our hands, we'll find out this calls something completely different. Now, at which point, if it's the week the comic book came out, then we feel like, yeah, we'll generally, if we got to make a change, that's the time we'll change it. And so there's a number of comic titles here. You'll notice that these ones here, in my old database, we took the hit right when we switched from ComicBase 2023 to ComicBase 2024. There's a number of comic books at that time which we used to refer to the publisher Idea Plus Design Works, aka IDW. We used to refer to it the way that they refer to themselves their first couple of issues, but which then for the next 10, 15 years they changed their mind on. And so we were stuck calling all their stuff Idea Plus Design Works. We finally gave in after, 15 or so years, and we actually, if you are installing ComicBase 2024 for the first time, we'll actually automatically change all these titles for you. Again, this is a copy of my phony baloney database, and so these did not get automatically changed. Otherwise, you'd have seen that all these Popeye Idea Plus Design Works would have become Popeye parenthesis IDW and so forth. But it is worth looking at this list and saying, and by the way, everything I'm going to say here is also stated right at the top in the instructions of this document. But basically says, look, here are things where, like, I don't recognize the comic title. The comic title might have changed. It might have been called, Blue Beetle first series, second series, third series, whatever else, and then it became, or volume 1, 2. The most famous one is Strange Tales. Marvel had Strange Tales Volume 1, Strange Tales Volume 2, Strange Tales Volume 3, and then Strange Tales Volume 1. That's what they called the fourth series. And so we had to go after the fact and change all of those titles. Now, this happened back in the 90s, so your copy is probably just fine. But we had to go after the fact and change the names of Strange Tales Volume 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3 to just be first series, second, third series, because Marvel decided after getting it right for like 30, 40 years, they were going to screw up the volume when they came to the fourth one and called Volume 1 again. So we had to change things. So occasionally we will change the name of a comic title. Most typically the comic title will change when either something about the designation changes and that it winds up just like if you have a bunch of children all with the same name, you start having to number them. It's like, you can be, Bobby McGee and then Bobby McGee Senior and Junior, and that works great until the third one appears on the scene. Then parents often go Bobby McGee the third. Same thing goes with comic titles. You can only go through so many, strange terror, thrilling adventures of terror. As soon as there's a second one on the scene, then suddenly that one has to become a strange, thrilling adventures of terror second series. So if they solicit one way and we find that we need, for clarity's sake, to refer to another way, we will change the title here. Below that will be the list of any comic books that it doesn't recognize and so forth. And it'll go down the collectibles to different things until it eventually gets, in this case here, the books. Now, in this case, these are some ones that legitimately did change a week or so ago. Mary Jane, the novel, changed. Someone had put it in as a trade paperback. Number one, turns out it was never published as a trade paperback. It was only ever a hardcover. And so in that case, we had to go back there and say, have a look at your books, because somebody misdesignated something, and it was probably us. But unfortunately, we're going to get rid of the entry that no longer exists anymore, and we're going to leave the entry that does make any kind of sense. So it is worth looking into. And so let's go over to Mary Jane in this case. Novel. Yeah, there we go. Right over there. And you'll see that this old database over here has the trade paperback number 1, trade paperback number 2, and if I let it download the pictures, you would see that it would show the pictures now for these things were listed as trade paperbacks, but they were truly hardcovers, so they became the other thing. It's worth trying to get on base when that happens as quickly as possible, because once we find a mistake and we fix it, we're going to try to stay with the fixed version from there on out. So in which case, I'm just going to go ahead and swap mine over to the proper designation, and then everything is restored. Now, you might also wonder, okay, so when you downloaded an update, and these things were really hardcovers, not trade paperbacks, what happens to the trade paperback entries? And the answer, if you're using the default settings, is the very next time you download an update, and here I am going to say go ahead and download the next update, and we'll show this guy. Come on, collecting the database information, doop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doo. Wish I knew a collection of 12-second jokes, which would be perfect for showing during these times. All right, so here's my update options. If you're using the standard update options, it will, down here at the bottom, it has some items to say remove obsolete series if they have no items in stock, and remove obsolete items if they're not listed as being in stock. We strongly recommend you leave both of these checked, because what that lets us do is, particularly if you never actually put any books of your own, you didn't say you have any items for that whole thing, for a particular title, it allows us to get rid of titles that were solicited one way or that we originally designated one way, and we found out later on we have to call it something else. There might have been a misspelling, they might have been solicited without the full title, they might have changed their minds after they initially solicited, whatever the thing is. But it lets us get rid of the obsolete ones, especially if you didn't have any stock listed. So that being thought, it's not going to compromise your inventory in any manner, so just let us get rid of the bogus one. Same thing goes for the obsolete items. So because I've now taken my trade paperback copies of the Mary Jane novel, which turns out they were really hardcovers anyway, there never was a trade paperback version. If I were to download the update again, it's going to see that there's zero quantity now next to those old trade paperback ones, and those trade paperback entries are just going to disappear from my database because they're not part of the master database anymore, and I don't have them listed in stock, and so I can safely get rid of them if you've checked this option. So definitely very much suggest that you guys leave those two options when you download updates. Leave those checked. Now, the only reason I would say ever don't check those two options is if you're using ComicBase intentionally to catalog things which you don't have, but which are never going to be in our master database. So, for instance, there are people who use ComicBase, they sort of abuse the titling and conventions to log their action figures. And so they might put in, okay, here's the Marvel, Wave 4, whatever hot action figures, whatever thing, and they might list all the members of Wave 4, even though they only have, action figures number 2 and 6. They might want to keep track of the fact that Wave 4 had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, however many were in that wave. In which case, if you're using ComicBase in that manner, then do not check the thing to tell us to remove the unknown items, because those are items that will never be in our master database. We don't track those things. There's a university, I forget which one, that is actually using ComicBase to track their bugs, like insects, because they liked the way it handled certain things. The searching was good for them, the reporting was good for them, and they liked that they could associate the pictures with everything. And so like, okay, great, here's our bug collection. It's like, okay, we're happy to sell you a copy of ComicBase if that's what you want. But if you're putting in your collection of different types of South American crickets or whatever else, that is again something that's never going to be in ComicBase itself. So for goodness sake, don't mark that as remove the things that aren't in the master database, even if they're not in stock, because otherwise we'll throw away any entries that don't have a quantity of 1 or greater. So that's a thing. All right, so that is that. That's the very long answer to that one. Let me check the chat because I've been babbling on for a while here. Let's see here. Holy cow. I've apparently been battling for a very long time. It's been a lot of talking. All right, so hello Zandu from Seattle. Welcome to the whole thing. Brian Stewart, as you can never have enough ISP bandwidth or disk space. Yeah, that's so true. Google Fiber in Kansas City is now 20 gig service. Damn. I'm like, that sounds absolutely phenomenal. I do not know where I could ever buy a 20 gig firewall. I don't know that that's a thing that regular humans are allowed to even own. It's certainly far in excess of the specs I've seen, no matter how much we spend on it. But that is awesome. Andre, I understand, also has like a 10 gig connection in his neck of the woods, which we have definitely priced out what 10 gig connections would cost, even to whip files around our own network. And they're awesome, but unless we start doing home video editing on a really commercial basis here at the offices, we are not going to be springing for everyone to be running 10 gig connections to their desktop. 2.5 is going to have to be enough for us for now. That being said, really excited about the idea of upping our internet bandwidth, particularly the up speed on that one, because like I say, our up speed is your down speed. So when you guys want to go and download, say, the Blu-ray disc images or something like that, if we can serve it to you twice as fast, that is a wonderful thing. All right, let's see here. Let's talk about the movies. And yeah, a lot of talk about the main characters are off the table. Cap, Iron Man, etc. I understand. By the way, speaking of marquee characters, I understand that they are going to be recasting Luke and Leia. That was just announced, but apparently not to do any kind of redo of the original story. So God knows what's going on with that over at Marvel. But let's see here. Let's see. Black Friday is now a lot like, okay, we got that one. Okay. And people are putting up the Christmas lights already. I'm impressed. Okay. It says, wow, you don't use the dark theme. Yeah, when I'm doing the live stream, I don't do the dark, just because it's hard to read on the video for this whole thing. But I mean, we can switch the theme over to dark if anyone wants that. Let's see here. So, by the way, and let's use that as an excuse for a bonus tip on this one. So what he's talking about that is, if you want to, you can go and change the overall look of your ComicBase database. Just go down here and go to File, then go to Theme. And you can choose a basic theme, and one, some of the ones you can do this, there's a tech theme that's, kind of cool. There's, which comes in both regular and dark. There's actually one called just Darkness. If you're just like, getting in touch with the defects of your heart or whatever the thing is. But I believe actually, I think a lot of the themes come with dark versions now. I think if you go to, is there like a Reflect? Yes, there's like a Reflect Dark and so forth. But yeah, no matter what your basic theme is, you can now say, give it to me in a dark one. At which point, instead of being black text on white primarily, or black text on a light color, you'll be using lighter text on dark and so forth. For some people, especially, I've heard that have different types of eye problems. The dark is much more relaxing for them. I don't use it in the show generally because it's not quite as good on video. So I'm going to go back to one of these themes right now. By the way, one thing I would definitely suggest, whatever you decide, if you do run more than one database, super good idea to give give your databases a different look, so that the very first time you're launching one or the other, you know instantly which one you're dealing with. So, if your main database is blue, make you're managing a friend's database, make his be purple, just something, just so you know instantly what you're working with. Let's see. I'm just going to mix this. Vapor's a little diluted for me. All right, let's go back to orange, and we'll take it from there. By the way, if you want to, you also can put in your own your own favorite custom background colors, and if you're really devoted, you actually can create your own theme files. You're allowed to edit the different themes that come with this one. And there's instructions on what the different parameters are somewhere on the website, which we go into all the different parameters. So if you want, you can customize every darn thing about the color and look and so forth to your heart's content and publish your own themes. So that's a thing. And you also can control when you start the program, whether it comes up with the painted version of the of our Archangel here or the sketch cover. So that's another thing you can do under themes. All right, moving back to the main thing here. All right. Let me see what else is going on. And Doug says, I think that if you mark the items as wanted, the update won't remove them. I think that's true. I believe that's true. The weird thing, Doug, is I couldn't swear to it just off the top of my head, but I believe you're right on that as well. Okay, and Brian says, so when are we getting action figures in ComicBase? Just kidding. I gotta say, just kidding or not just kidding, I mean, it's a valid question. Let me ask you this, go ahead and just give a thumbs up in the chat, yes or no. Just say for yucks. Let's say we had a New Year's surprise, and it was that there was a category in ComicBase for action figures, but the number of action figures listed in the database was, let's just say incredibly minimal. I mean, let's say, it would give enough so you could see the format of what you'd have to do, but more or less all the data entry would have to be up to you guys. And then we would, do what we do on everything else, that we would allow you to submit things, and then we'd, spread the data around and grow the database, but we'd have to be coming in from nothing, or next to nothing. Cool, not cool, worth it, not worth it. What do you think? Just quick answer in the chat. Let me know what y'all think. Because I mean, there's certain categories where I'll put out there, we can't. We could never try to assemble a meaningful amount of data for the category. I'm thinking about things like video games. If you want to track your movies or your video games, you could do it by essentially rating Amazon for data. But if you do that under a licensing agreement with Amazon that gives them, basically you have to kick them a bunch of your revenue and swear that the reason you're doing it is so you can drive sales to their site. There are things you could do that would get you there, but there's other ways to do it where you simply say, look, here's the category, here's the format, here's a little bit of data that we happen to have laying around the whole time, but if you want to add your own and then optionally submit it to the group whole, we could grow the database organically from nothing. But man, there's no way we could. I mean, we spent 30 years putting together the database that is ComicBase, and there is not enough time in my lifetime to do a database similar for things like toys, action figures, antique, table, plates from the Franklin Mint, whatever the thing is that you collect. But that being said, a lot of these things do form into series that if we could give you the template for doing it much more easily than we could give you the data. So let us know. What do you think? All right. So Brian says, what about category for original art, sketches, and commissions? I'm tracking down my main ComicBase to make sure that the obsolete function never nukes them. Gosh, that'd be a great conversation for yeah, I think we'd have to like talk either in person or like in a ComicBase After Dark, but in some kind of a longer format. The problem with something like original art or sketches, commissions, and so forth is it doesn't fall into a series, and so kind of like the model of the collectibles that we track in ComicBase all kind of relies on them not being one-offs, or at least it certainly works better when the stuff isn't a one-off, because then we could sit there and say, oh, well, hey, this is the the sketch series from blah blah blah, and we know there were 20 of them published, and they're issues number 1 through 8. You might only have 3 of them, but we can add some value in terms of organizing the overall thing, when it's simply just here's a bunch of everything I've got laying around my house, or just here's a bunch of just random disassociated elements that I can't add a lot to, other than maybe I've got an idea, I can jot it down and have a picture of it and then put a value on it. If that's all the value we can bring to it, it's not as great as it can be if you sit there and say this is the rookie baseball NFL series, or the American League, from 2017, Topps, baseball series. That one, it's possible to know all the players. It's possible to know all the cards, and even if you don't have them, what the bounds are and what you're missing and so forth. And there's more kind of like collecting-ish goodness we can add to the table by doing the model we've got. But with that said, you gotta love how when people say "with that said," you then go to contradict everything you just said. With that said, maybe that is something that's worth shoehorning in. If so, yeah, let's talk. Maybe there's a way to do it that isn't a bad way. Age Camp says, when's next After Dark? I can talk too much again. Yeah, no, I felt like I was the guy who talked too much. By the way, thank you everyone who came to that one. I really appreciate y'all. And if at some point when things got got involved, if I ever talked over everyone, I'm greatly apologize. Just like but we all had a great time. Typically do about once a month, so probably we do it in probably sometime in the in the vicinity of Black Friday, whenever that winds up being. But we'll do that. And Doug Wren says, yeah, no, and sports cars really blowing up. So we'll think about it. But yeah, thank you very much. It sounds like the general opinion, at least of the people who've come in so far, is like the idea of having categories. But again, I want to stipulate, if we had exposed some different categories on here, they would necessarily come in with either no or next to no data out of the box. So it'd be something where you'd be, the burden would be on you to provide the data that's there. You wouldn't be getting a lot. I mean, like with ComicBase, it's like you can just download the update and virtually, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but some of the tech calls, things I guess I didn't talk about on this tip show so far, is one's like, well, how do I add a comic to the database? And I'm like, wow. In 1994, that would have been an unthinkable question, because you had to add everything. I mean, it's like we would, at that point, the model for comics and pricing in the world was, we're coming in like the Overstreet Price Guide. We come out once a year, and then things happen during the year, and you got to put those in. Then next year we'll tell you what they were worth. That's we try to stick to our naming convention, and then hopefully everything syncs up the next time. That was the way ComicBase operated for the first 10 years of its existence. When we did ComicBase 10, we started the idea of saying, well, what if we simply buy one copy of almost every comic book ever made, and then we add it on a weekly basis to the database, And then over time, we got to where we're at right now, where we add so much in that, again, it's in a way, it's a compliment of you can count on finding so much in the database without ever entering it yourself. That yeah, we're increasingly getting that as a question of like, well, wait, how do I add something? And the short version is up in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. There's a new comic or a new magazine or a new book, and you just hit do that, and you fill out what's there, and then it'll appear in the list. After which point, if you would, and this is probably worth showing. So if I have, well, let's bounce over to comic books over here. If I've got a brand new series, let's switch the screen so people can see what I'm doing. So up here in the upper left-hand corner, there is your category that you're looking at, and right next to that is essentially a new button, which is new comic book. If I'm on comic books, it'll be new book. If I'm on books and so forth, you put in the title, my big new series. And if it doesn't recognize the new series, it'll say, okay, that's a brand new series, and who published it? And we'll say that's DC, and it came out in 2023. You hit go, hit save on that, and it'll say, all right, well, what issue are you putting in? And I'm going to add issues 1 through 3, and they were all $4.99. I don't know who wrote or drew them. And then I'm just going to go down here and say save. And then there's issues 1 through 3 of my big new series. Now, if I then highlight all 3 of those and say submit new or corrected data, then it sends it to us, and that goes to our editor, and he'll say, Bickford, what's this my big new series thing? That's obviously BS data, and hopefully reject it, as opposed to saying, wait, the boss just sent a correction in, and I better take it. No, but anyway, but if you do that submit new or corrected data, then it goes to our editors, and what they can do then is they can add it to the master database, and that becomes part of what everyone gets as part of the weekly update. And so that's how you add a new thing to the database. By the way, if you want to get rid of it, which I do, just highlight the issues at the far left here, hit the delete key. It'll say permanently remove those 3 comic books. And once you do that, it goes away. All right. So back to that. Let's see here. Let me see here. See. Oh, do you ever check out Action Figure 411? Yeah, I mean, there's to speak to the chat. Yeah, there's various places that track data on stuff, but even if it's like data about real things, you can't just loot someone else's data. Because then they can sue you. Just like if you just scrape all of ComicBase's data, we will sue you, because it takes. We have well over $1 million in time and labor building our database. It's 30 years of my life, and a lot of other people's lives, to make all this happen. And so, yeah, we don't want all the data just being ripped off. And I imagine the people who've done the same thing with action figures or trading cards feel exactly the same way. So, I mean, you can work licensing deals with them. My experience when I investigated this in a bigger way is that there aren't a lot of people where a licensing deal would be practical. In other words, they don't have a comprehensive enough set with pricing that's updated consistently that it makes any kind of sense to try to work a deal. It's a lot more ad hoc out there, and it's one of those things where, like, yeah, we can take data you guys submit to us, but we can't go out there and just rip off people's stuff. Yeah, that's why if we did any of these other collectibles, it would come from data that we knew that we'd put in ourselves, and that would start the whole thing off. But I couldn't just open up Hakes Collectibles or something and start typing. So that's a thing. All right, and all right, I think that more or less catches me up with the chat on that one. So we'll move on from that one. Okay, so next question was, I've got ComicBase and I want to force it to reprice everything to guide price. How do I do this? And this is a better question than you'd think. I don't know. It's a better question than at least I would think at first glance. What it comes down to is, because it's surprisingly complicated when you think about it, is when an update gets pushed down. I mean, like, you could say, on one hand, you could say, well, why don't you just download the latest update and tell it to update the pricing, right? And the answer on that is slightly subtle, in that when you download and update, and remember there are something like 1.2 million comic books in the database. There's 3 million and change newspapers. There's 250,000 magazines and books and so forth. I mean, there's phenomenal numbers of items in the database. So when it's downloading an update, and we temporarily pull a copy of all the new data down onto your machine, and we say, well, what's different? But we don't then push 3 million price updates for newspapers to set the price equal to the other price. Now, we only do that if the price changed from what you had last time. And the thing that's complicating that also is you have a choice as to whether or not you use our prices or not. And so you can say, well, look, I want the new data, but I don't want to just leave my values alone. I don't want your new values because I do all my own valuation. I don't want your new prices, whatever else. And so there's actually an invisible flag in the database which says, what was the last US dollars near mint value for this item? You never get to see this field, but trust me, it's there. And what happens is when you're downloading an update and it's saying, well, it's trying to figure out what values have changed, it says, is the US dollar near mint value of this book different than it was last time? And so it only tries to do updates on the things where that dollar value has changed. So if for whatever reason you've been downloading updates and you switch currencies, or you do various different decisions about whether or not you want to update things or not, we don't want to push 4 million database updates, or 4.5 million database updates for everything every week. It would take forever, and so we don't. So most of the time, we're pretty good about figuring out when you've changed your local currency, whether you've changed the decision as to whether or not you take updates to your prices, whether you've changed the decision about whether you've changed updates to your values and so forth. If that happens, so if the last time you downloaded an update, you'd said, yeah, I don't want you to touch my values ever, and then you download the update again and say, now please touch my values. If that's different, then we say, oh, well, then all your old values might be stale. And so now this time we will update all 3.5 million or 4.5 million items in the database if we have to. I'm going to say we're pretty good at that. I'm not going to say we're perfect. I mean, there are definitely times you can trick us, especially if you copy databases from different machines, different preference settings. I mean, there's different ways you can pull a sneaky behind our back where we don't catch the change. If that ever happens, though, we have built something into the database that will allow you to force it to update all the values to the new thing, regardless of what we thought your current state was. And that is, we've actually built that into a thing called the mass change command. So if you guys ever use the mass change command, it's up here under items. And mass change, mass change is a weird one because it's one of these things that you're going to use this command next to never, but when you need it badly. So, for instance, if I want to go there and I want to say something like, I want to set all the stuff in my database to be for sale, right? And that's what mass change is really great for, is I'm just going to say, like, I'm going to change the for sale field for all my comic books to, and I can change it to either a checkbox or to a value. So I can say, make it the same as another field. Right, in this case it's a checkbox field, so it's going to be the same as another checkbox field. Or I can say, just make it be all one thing or the other. So in this case, if I want to say everything in my database is for sale, I would say change everything is for sale. Say value is checked. I can do it for all titles or selected titles, and then I say go, boom, and it does it for the whole database. Now that works fine. Again, you're going to use mass change next to never, but when you need it bad. The one thing that it's a little subtle about the mass change thing is, so let's go ahead and pull mass change up again. And for some reason, I'm having trouble with my screen sizing. It's wanting to zoom out to different weird types here. So forgive me on this if the screen looks a little weird. So if I go and I say a field such as the value or the price, say so the current value is the year for 2023 value. I'm sorry, I'm getting this wrong. So if I say I want to take the price and I want to set everything to be the year 4 value, all right, which is the 2023 value. So what I'm essentially saying here is make all my prices be whatever their current value is. And very good idea if you are going to do this one to also hit that round button. The reason you do rounding is because if you don't hit round and you've got a book that's in, say, very fine condition, very fine, I believe it's either 65 or 66% of near mint. But let's say you've got a book that's, $1, right? And I say it's in very fine. Are you really going to sell this thing for 66 cents? Nah, it's going to be the next reasonable number. It'll be either 65 or 50 or whatever the thing is, and the rounding scheme goes up based on the value of the book. So if it's a $1,000 book, you're not going to sell it for $666. You're going to sell it for $650 or something like that. Anyway, if you don't hit round, if you do this sort of thing, your price is liable to be quirky. It'll be very, very precise, but it'll be quirky. At least someone buying it will say, that's a very odd price for that. But anyway, so if I say, make my price be the same as its current value, round it off, and I say go on this one, what it's going to actually do is it's going to force it to do that reevaluation, and it'll also evaluate it with the grade in mind on the whole thing, and it'll set that across your entire database, and it does that regardless of what it thought the previous that invisible US dollar near mint value was last time out. And so it will force it to update all the prices in this case for all the comic books in my database. If I want to do it for all the newspapers, I do the same thing. I would just go down here to newspapers and repeat the same story. But yeah, that will force your database to be using the official current value as we see it, regardless of what you'd been doing in the past, regardless of what country you're in, and so forth. So that is a good way to do those things. All right, so let me see here. All right, so looks like I'm gonna have to sign off here because we're reaching the top of the hour, and apparently I gotta help out some folks here with this week's content update. So I will be letting y'all go here in a minute, but before I do, want to do the official announcements. First of all, if you guys like this sort of thing, please do like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us get going. And the other thing here, remember, we have a dedicated message thread on the message boards where you can request live stream demos and topics, and there is also a link to Andre's amazing ComicBase cover catalog. And I think that is about it. Guys, you have a terrific one. I will see you on the next one, and you guys all take care. Bye-bye.